Hi, I'm Andrew McPherson. This one, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, is a part of my DNA, I would say, at this stage of the game. I, like many people, had an older brother who had a huge record collection and was obsessed with music and was just 2 years older than me, but old enough to have some extra cash. And he would often buy records. And he was old for his age, too. So he got to hang out with older guys in high school, and they turned him on to some great music. And one of the bands that came into the house was Genesis. He was... he was the guy bringing music into the family, at least, music of our time. When we were kids, these were new. And, hi, see, even you like The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Cats endorse The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. There you have it, folks. That's all you need. Yep. So he introduced me to all sorts of things. In fact, I would say he almost... look at this. Okay, you really are going to be part of this. This is awesome. I'm so happy. Here, you got to stay right here. He introduced me to some of the great early 80s electronica, which completely blew my mind and opened my ears to things. Since we've sort of diverged our paths, but this album, I have to thank my brother. When this came out, this is 74, right? I would have been 12. So, and this record just ripped my head off. It's important to understand that one of the reasons why I would love a record like this, which is a dense progressive rock album, with Peter Gabriel, of course, at the center of it all, but also no slouch were the other members of the band: Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, Steve Hackett, Phil Collins. Might have heard of him. I kind of had prog rock already in my blood before I knew what it was, before I heard my first copy of Dark Side of the Moon or metal or... Anyway, there was something about the songcraft. It listens like a book, in that it's just not going to give you the character in 2 minutes. So you sort of have to stick along for the whole narrative. And there's an incredible story that is in the inside artwork that is just totally insane. Every aspect of it, even the graphics. 1974. People weren't really working with Cubist design all that much in pop records that I can remember, but I thought it was just really interesting. So I think in terms of creating a template for what's possible, gave me a lot of clues. There was definitely a few years, college years, where I was living with a guy who was studying philosophy. I was studying music, and we were musical obsessives, and this album was pretty much a cornerstone. So it's possible it got overplayed, but I have never lost my appreciation for it. In fact, it blows my mind every time I put it on how contemporary it sounds, both just as a story, as an incredible story, and it's totally peculiar, of course. I won't even try to praise the actual narrative, but also sonically, it's an incredible recording. And as somebody who makes records, I find that very compelling when an album can be, what is this? About 43 years old. That's all right. Well, the artwork, again, is awesome. I believe it's a Hypnosis sleeve, which did so many of the influential album jackets of the 70s and 80s. Just landmark design team. And Brian Eno appears on this album, and he is credited with enosification. So as a massive Brian Eno fan, I found that quite fascinating when I grew to know Eno in much greater detail later in life. I try to listen to it all the way through if I can, but sometimes that's a big chew. So there are some difficult pieces on one of the sides. I'm trying to remember which. Yeah, I believe it's side 3, but where they were clearly influenced by Eno. Actually, I'm quite certain it was all Eno's doing. Yeah, I would say that's how I kind of enjoy this record. There are definitely, I would say, a handful of other albums that have been as influential as this. This one was just so notable because it brought together so many of the things I love about music. Great lyrics, amazing frontman, incredible melodies, the most sophisticated music arrangements, wicked chops on the players, and great production. I would say David Bowie's Young Americans, a complete 180 from this record, but a year earlier, that just was a head snapper for me, that album. And it wasn't the songs necessarily that were the big hits on that one, like Fame and Young Americans, that got me. There was actually a couple other tunes, Win, which we cover in my band, and Somebody Up There Likes Me, like unbelievable soul songs. Other albums that would have influenced me, I would say Brian Eno's Music for Airports. I've probably listened to that album more than any other album in my life. Peter Gabriel's Passion is also a front runner, an absolutely mind-blowing record. And probably tons of Fela Kuti. I love dub as well. Don't get me started. This isn't a tie to Genesis, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. So this is Jeff Buckley, Grace, his first full-length record. It really is only formally released final recordings, as it were. The second one was really not complete. I sort of think of the Genesis as the BC of my musical journey, and this is AD. So we're now, we're in the 1900s now. Yeah, I mean, this album is, 94? Yeah, so 20 years after the Genesis record. And I was listening to a lot of very different music by that point. I actually didn't catch on to this record when it first came out. And I missed him when he performed around here. And I am heartbroken because they are considered to be, desert island performances. But due to his very, very untimely early death. But yeah, this Grace represents to me the guitar. I discovered guitar in my 30s. Not sure what took me so long. I've been listening to them for years, but no, I was just such a snobby art rock prog guy that it was all about keyboards and rhythms and complicated time signatures and being nerdy. And Jeff Buckley comes out of nowhere, citing Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan as his vocal influence. And I'm just like, who is this guy? And the conviction and the beauty in his playing was just, not to mention his voice, of course. It just completely changed for me the framework of what is possible now with music, because it was fiercely artistic like the Genesis record is, but it felt like they were songs that I could possibly learn. It just felt like this guy was an angel that got plucked too soon. So yeah, there was, I think why this would be sort of the AD of my musical upbringing or my musical tutelage is because the craft is so great, and yet it speaks to my more immediate musical passion, which is trying to get things more in the moment and being less about an intellectual. Well, I was aware of his father, but I'd never listened to any Tim Buckley, so that kind of wasn't any help. I think I might have heard a tune and thought, wow, this is really heavy, but really melodic and beautifully produced. I remember really taking an interest. There was a show that used to run out of City TV in Toronto called The New Music, and they did an interview with him. He was obviously in town to do that performance that I never went to, which I am killing myself for. And he was just such an interesting guy. He was clearly super literate, and he went on and on and on about this incredible qawwali singer, this Pakistani singer who is considered to be one of the greatest vocalists of all time, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. And he said, if I could sing like anyone, it would be like this Pakistani qawwali singer. And I was like, okay, you have my attention. I have certainly read some great stories about, his early years. I don't know the specifics necessarily about this recording, but I know that it was a very tight band. It was essentially a 3-piece band. And I find it strange that they haven't actually gone on really to do anything else musically since Jeff died, because they had phenomenal chemistry, in my opinion. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think I do remember reading some great stories about him performing at this place called Live at Chenet. It's a tiny little club apparently in New York City, and he would just be in there on a Monday night making up these crazy vocal calisthenics over these beautiful songs and singing classics. He covered songs all the time and used them kind of as sort of vocal master classes for himself. And people became curious. And I think that is ultimately what, brought Columbia Records in the door. I think he'd done this, EP that sort of showed, wow, this apple doesn't fall too far from the father's tree. But yeah, I'm almost certain that these recordings are live off the floor for the most part, because you see footage of him playing, and it's just the cohesiveness of this band is insane. Like this. You kids want to learn about ensemble? Here's your record.